Hello, I'm Maria Williams with the Collaborative on Healthy Environment. Change is bringing you the latest environmental health science through our partnership calls and webinars, science serves, publications, and social media. I would like to welcome everyone to today's Schade Partnership webinar, which is titled, Driving the Transition to Safer Chemicals Through Consumer and Retailer Advocacy. Our moderator today is Karen Wang, Director of Schade. We will leave time following the presentations for a brief Q&A session. You may type in questions through the Q&A feature available on the menu bar at the top of your window at any point during the presentations. After the presentations, our moderator will read out questions for our panelists to respond to. We will get to as many comments and questions as we can during the Q&A period. For those of you who called in on the phone, we have posted slides to accompany today's webinar on our website. You can download these by going to healthandenvironment.org. Please scroll to the bottom of the page and select today's webinar. On the webinar page is a link to the slides. Everyone on the webinar right now is muted with the exception of our moderator and our speakers. This webinar is scheduled to last for 45 minutes and is being recorded for our call-in webinar archive. With that, I'll turn things over to you, Karen.
Great, thanks, Maria. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Wang, the Director of Schade, and we're really excited about today's webinar. In today's political climate, consumer and retailer actions are more important than ever for protecting the public from harmful chemicals. That's why we're really excited to hear today from two speakers who work on the front lines of consumer and retailer advocacy. First, we're going to hear from Mike Schade, who is the Mind the Store campaign director of Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families. The Mind the Store campaign drives the nation's largest retailers to eliminate toxic chemicals in products and packaging and to create comprehensive, safer chemical policies. Then we'll turn it over to Lindsay Dahl, who is Beautycounter's Vice President of Social and Environmental Responsibility. Beautycounter, for those of you who are not familiar, is a national personal care company that advocates for stricter guidelines and regulatory shifts in the personal care industry. So with that, we're going to start off with you, Mike. So I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Mike. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, and thank you to Karen and Shay and Maria for organizing today's webinar. It's a real honor to be here. I've been a fan of Shay for many years and on the list and I've probably been on more conference calls than I can count. So thanks so much for inviting me to present. And excited to be here with my former colleague, Lindsay, who she and I worked closely together on the Mind the Store campaign some years ago. So I'm going to be talking today about Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families, our Mind the Store campaign, and work that we're doing to leverage the purchasing power of large retailers to phase out chemicals of high concern, move to safer substitutes, improve ingredient transparency, and develop more systemic safer chemicals policies. So for those of you that may not be familiar with us, Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families was launched a little less than 10 years ago to advocate for federal reform of our nation's broken chemical safety system. We were one of the lead organizations working to advocate for broad and comprehensive TSCA reform. We lead a coalition of over 450 organizations and businesses that are working to safeguard the public from toxic chemicals. We launched the Mind the Store campaign 5 years ago, recognizing that retailers can really play an important role in protecting consumers, the public, communities, and workers from toxic chemicals in everyday products and packaging, and also released through their life cycle. Over the past 20 years, we've often seen it's often retailers that are the first to take action when a chemical hazard is really kind of elevated to a national debate. For example, when news first came out about bisphenol A in baby bottles about 10 years ago, some of the first to act were large retailers, companies like Walmart, Toys R Us, Target, and others. So we launched the Mind the Store campaign to challenge retailers to phase out key chemicals of high concern and develop systemic safer chemical policies to ensure that substitutes are safe, and also to develop more robust approaches to chemicals management. These here are some of the examples of chemicals that the campaign has worked to reduce and eliminate over the years, like flame retardants in furniture and electronics, bisphenol A in canned food linings, phthalates in vinyl plastics, perfluorinated chemicals or PFAS in textiles and food contact materials. One of the ways in which we have not only encouraged retailers to take action on chemicals of high concern such as these and to develop comprehensive or more robust approaches has been to put out an annual report, a report card that has been benchmarking retail progress in this space. So I'm going to talk a little bit, most of my talk will be about that. So 2 years ago, we decided that it would be effective to put out a report that really aimed to look at who are the retail leaders and who are the retail laggards. One, to make it easier for consumers, investors, and members of the media to understand this, but also to help create a sense of competition in the retail space to essentially drive a race to the top. So this here is a snapshot of the first ever report card that we put out 2 years ago when we ranked 11 major retailers. And you'll see here this headline from Bloomberg at the time: Walmart is first, Amazon is worst in new ranking on chemicals. And it's exciting as we take a step back 2 years later and take a look at some of these companies with letter grades of D or F. We've seen many of them, including Home Depot and Lowe's and Costco and Amazon, really step up and significantly improve their approach to chemicals management. So this, for us, has been a really effective tool to drive transformative change in the retail space. As evidence of that, within 1 year of publishing our first ever report card, last year, 7 out of 11 of the companies that we ranked or evaluated announced either brand new safer chemicals policies or significant improvements to their approach to chemicals management. A number of these companies launched policies who told us that when we first started meeting with them that they were never going to develop a broad chemicals policy. Companies like Costco and the Home Depot, for example. And it was not a coincidence that we saw many of these companies announce their chemical policies just about a month or two before our second annual retail report card was published last fall. So this year is evidence of the type of change that the campaign is causing in the marketplace. So our theory of change is really working. By publicly benchmarking companies, this is really driving retailers to significantly improve their approach to chemicals management. For our second report card, last year we launched a brand new website, retailerreportcard.com, to really make it even easier for people to understand who are the retail leaders and who are the retail laggards. Unfortunately, that website, just as of yesterday, went under construction because we're in the midst of updating it for the 2018 report card coming out next month. But this here is a snapshot of it. If you go to that website, retailerreportcard.com, you can actually download a fact sheet from last year's report. You can also download a PDF, which has most of the content from the report card. And this here also is a snapshot of some of the media attention that the campaign and our annual report card achieved or led to last year, stories such as these in Bloomberg and Chemical and Engineering News. So I'm just going to walk very quickly through our approach, our methodology, and some of the metrics we utilize for the report card. So in our second report card we put out last year, we decided that given the lack of leadership we're seeing in Washington with the Trump White House and Trump EPA, we felt that it was really important to amplify and increase pressure in the marketplace to drive change. So we expanded the campaign and expanded the report card from 11 major retailers to 30 top retailers who are leaders in their respective sectors, which I'll talk about momentarily. And we rank or evaluate companies across 14 key metrics. Because we're short on time, I'm not going to go through those. But we have 14 metrics. We rank companies around from whether they have a chemical policy, what is their approach to ingredient transparency, can they show progress in reducing and eliminating chemicals, third-party standards, issues such as these. And we've really made a point to harmonize the criteria in a report card with the Chemical Footprint Project, which we see as one of the best-in-class tools for chemicals management. And the reason we did that is because we recognize that there's a lot of survey fatigue out there in this space, and we think it's important for us to send market signals on what are the best-in-class approaches to chemicals management. So across these 14 criteria or metrics we have, we award a certain number of points for each metric, anywhere from 0 to 17.5 points. And then we give companies up to 135 possible numerical points, and then we have a letter grading system to correspond to that, as you'll see here. And it's important to note that we share with companies our draft scores in advance because we think it's important, A, to be transparent, but B, to give companies an opportunity to review our findings and share any information that they would like to disclose or make public. And that has been really, I think, one of the impacts that the report card has had over the past couple of years has been to drive companies to be more transparent about their approach to chemicals management. And at the same time, thirdly, it's also led to many companies making significant new commitments to address chemicals of concern in their supply chains. This here is a snapshot of the 30 companies that we ranked in last year's report card. And we are evaluating companies in about roughly a dozen key consumer product sectors where chemicals of high concern are commonly found, from electronics to grocery stores to home improvement to big box stores. And our focus is really the companies in those different sectors who have the biggest market share as retailers, because as leaders in their respective sectors, they can play a really critical role in driving dangerous chemicals out of supply chains within those product categories. Since the website is not up at the moment, this here is a little bit visual snapshot of some of the information that we have on it. So when it will be back up in mid-November, you'll be able to compare and contrast companies. You can click, for example, on the companies that got letter grades of F if you want to see the worst performers, or you can click on A or B to see who are the best. You can also click through and see how different companies in a specific sector compare with one another. So for example, if you were interested in office retailers or beauty retailers or another particular sector, you can click through to see how companies in a particular sector compare and contrast with one another. This here is a quick snapshot of what it looks like to look at any one particular company page, in this case, Target. You'll see that we have a nice quick snapshot of the company's letter grade in a nice chemical beaker there. They were one of the higher performing companies over the past couple of years with a letter grade of B+ last year. And then for each company, we enable viewers or users to see a quick visual snapshot of their score for each of the 14 criteria on this bar graph. So in Target's case, they got 12 out of 15 points under policy, 10 out of 10 in oversight, and so on. And then if you're interested in understanding why we awarded the company the score that we did, you can also click through and read an explanation of what they're doing or what they're not doing in many cases, sadly. So this here is a quick snapshot of the companies that we scored in last year's report, the companies with the highest and the lowest grades. While we are seeing significant improvement across the retail sector, unfortunately, far too many companies continue to remain serious laggards. Last year, 2/3 of companies that we evaluated received letter grades of D or F, and 9 out of 30 companies receiving letter grades of F, so clearly lots of room for improvement. And 8 out of 9 of those receiving 0 out of 135 possible points. So clearly there's still a lot more work to be done. If you're interested, I mentioned our website is under construction, but you can go to it, retailreportcard.com, and you can download this fact sheet you see here, and you can compare and contrast the 30 retailers across the 14 criteria. You can also download a copy of last year's report. And again, this is a tool that we've been utilizing over the past couple of years to really aim to drive a race to the top in the retail sector. So moving on a little bit, and you can also, I forgot I had this slide here. And in the report, there's also a pretty in-depth narrative that kind of looks at trends one of the interesting trends that we saw is that some sectors are actually doing pretty well and others are doing quite poorly. So for example, of the dollar stores that we ranked, the dollar store chains were pretty poor performers compared to other sectors that we evaluated. And again, you can download last year's report card on our website. So I want to transition a little bit to note that we're not only working to drive retailers to develop comprehensive safer chemicals policies, but we have also been challenging retailers to focus on reducing and eliminating key classes of chemicals of high concern that we think are particularly problematic from a public health perspective. So these are the classes of chemicals we've been focusing on over the past year in particular: flame retardants, orthophthalates, PFAS chemicals, and also certain solvents, in particular methylene chloride and NMP, two chemicals that EPA proposed banning under the new TSCA law that Congress signed 2 years ago. So I want to talk a little bit about our campaign work, particularly around the paint stripper issue as a case study. So last year we decided to challenge home improvement retailers to reduce and eliminate paint strippers, not only because EPA was proposing to ban them, but they can literally be deadly for consumers and for workers. Since 1980, there's been at least 60 consumers or workers who've been killed from working with or using methylene chloride-based paint strippers. So this past year, we partnered with families to launch a campaign challenging Lowe's to phase out the sale of paint strippers containing methylene chloride and NMP. And we launched the campaign in conjunction with a story that we helped pitch to CBS News, telling the story of one family whose son was killed from a paint stripper that he had bought at Lowe's, and coincidentally, a product that we warned Lowe's about when we had written to them. So we launched the campaign in conjunction with the CBS story. We held a national press teleconference with our partners at NRDC. We then launched an online petition to Lowe's. And over the course of a couple of months, we generated over 200,000 petitions or emails to Lowe's. This here is a snapshot of some of the online petitions. And then we also organized in-person actions. This here are photos from in-person events in Vermont and in Minnesota. We also generated press coverage working with the families. And as a result of that, this May, just 3 days before we were planning on showing up to Lowe's shareholder meeting to deliver over 200,000 petitions, we were going to bring some of the families of young men who were killed with paint strippers containing methylene chloride. Lowe's announced that they were going to phase out the sale of these deadly and dangerous chemicals by the end of this year. And over the past few months, we've since won similar commitments from 7 other top retailers: Home Depot, Walmart, Sherwin-Williams, AutoZone, PPG, and others. And in total, from these 8 retailers, we've won commitments from retailers that have over 25,000 stores globally that have committed to pulling these deadly and dangerous products from store shelves, most of which are going to stop selling them by the end of this December. And in the case of Walmart, in Walmart stores and on Walmart.com by February. So this kind of shows an example of the type of campaign that we run to drive specific chemicals of high concern out of the marketplace by leveraging the power and influence of consumers and family members to call attention to one particular company and then challenge their competitors to follow suit. So with that, I'll close out of time here to talk about some of these things, but I'll just note that we are continuing to drive retailers to take action, and we're going to be releasing our next report card this November in about a month. And this year we're ranking a larger number of retailers once again, because given the news we're continuing to hear out of Washington with the federal government asleep at the wheel when it comes to protecting consumers, communities, and workers from toxic hazards, we think that it's critical for the business community, especially retailers, to step up and safeguard American families from toxic hazards. So this here is a snapshot of the new retailers we're going to be ranking in this year's report card. So with that, I will close. If you're interested in getting in touch, here's my contact information, and I'll pass it over to my colleague Lindsay, and perhaps I can hit some of the points I was going to in the Q&A discussion. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Dahl, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. And it's fun to see all the progress that the Mind the Store campaign has made over the last 5 years. It's had a tremendous impact in the marketplace. I'm going to speak a little bit today about the work I do here at Beautycounter and the role that a new face of business can look like to help move the market towards safer chemicals. So our goal at Beautycounter is to get safer products into the hands of everyone. And for us, that doesn't mean just Beautycounter's products. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Our company was built on 3 core pillars. The first of which is education, knowing that the majority of American consumers are still mostly unaware that there are harmful chemicals or ingredients in the products that they use every single day. The second, of course, is through product. So we bring safer products to the market. We have over 170 SKUs on the market right now, which when I started at the company 4 years ago, there was, we had about, 20 employees and maybe 35 products. So we've grown a lot in the last 5 years, and I think a lot of that is because the market is responding. But our CEO felt like she wanted to create a consumer-facing brand that really afforded people the opportunity to not only learn about the issue, but to create solutions that they could use in their home, which therein comes our product line. The final pillar upon our brand, of which our brand is built on, is advocacy. So this is where I kind of bring my experience from DC and state legislatures to the Beautycounter team. Our CEO, her name is Greg Renfrew, she felt that it wasn't enough just to start a company that was making safer products, but that the company had to use their voice in Washington to ultimately fix the problem, which is the fact that the beauty industry is one of the least regulated consumer marketplaces. So the last time that Congress has passed a major federal law governing the personal care industry, specifically ingredient safety, was in 1938. Certainly when FDR signed the bill into law, at the time the bill seemed like it was something special, but we've learned a lot over the last 80 years around our exposure to environmental health and chemicals. And so we feel like we want to use our business voice in a meaningful way. I first want to speak a little bit about our safety screening because that is the kind of core and DNA of who we are as a company. So unlike other brands that have been on the marketplace for a long time, since Beautycounter is new, when we started and launched 5.5 years ago, we had the opportunity to start from scratch and to really ask questions around ingredient safety that reflected the most up-to-date science. And so this slide, while it's a little bit text heavy, I'm going to kind of walk you through the 5 steps of how we screen ingredients, because I think it's illustrative of where we want the market to move, knowing that there's only so many chemicals and ingredients in the market that we can use now. And we hope that this type of screening process will help create demand for a new marketplace of safer chemicals. So it's pretty common today to have companies, whether they're in the beauty space or otherwise, to have a restricted substance list. We call ours the Never List, and it's a list of over 1,500 ingredients that we'll never use to formulate our products. But that's just the really first step of our safety screening. I think the kind of heart of where our brand is differentiated is in the second step, which is where we screen ingredients that go into our products, which sounds like it should be something that every company is doing, but unfortunately isn't the kind of standard practice in the industry. So we use the best-in-class science, looking to all of our academic partners across the country and globe to screen ingredients for safety before they're used in our formulations. We screen for 22 different health endpoints, including things you would expect like hormone disruption, infertility, carcinogenicity, etc. Step number 3 is around learning constantly. We know that the base of science around our exposure to different chemicals is always evolving. So just because an ingredient was safe when we first launched Beautycounter, we're not going to assume that the data has stayed static. What that means is we basically are constantly surveying scientific literature to see if it needs to impact our formulations. One thing that's really exciting is we've partnered with Tufts University for the last 2 years, specifically to look at the endocrine impacts and androgen impacts of commonly used ingredients in the personal care industry. This is an area of science that there's major data gaps, not only just when you look at endocrine disruption, but specific to ingredients that are used in the personal care industry. So this has been a really helpful partnership for us to understand more about the ingredients we use in our formulations, but also help fill some of those data gaps. Source responsibly really addresses everything from sourcing as best we can from sustainable feedstocks from our pretty complicated global supply chain. We've been doing a tremendous amount of work on step number 4, specifically around forced labor, which is a huge issue in the industry. And so working with our suppliers to make sure that we have responsible sourcing for all of the hands that touch our products long before they hit store shelves. And then sharing transparently. So that's both getting back to the education, sharing transparently about the ingredients we do use and why, or sharing the science that I had mentioned through our different partnerships. Happy to answer more questions about that as well. Our approach to screening for safety has been validated by the Chemical Footprint Project, which Mike referenced. We have participated for the last 3 years, and we're really proud to earn the top score each of those years. And it just kind of underscores the approach that we've taken, which is we start with a hazard screen and then we use a risk assessment. And we think the combination of those two, making sure that you have relevant exposure data to understand how people are exposed to certain chemicals and you're asking those critical questions, is the way forward for understanding safety. We're also a certified B Corporation, which if you're familiar, it means that the company values people, planet, and profit equally when making decisions. It's a pretty rigorous undertaking. If you're familiar, the average score is 55 for companies who apply. It takes 80 to pass. Our first year we applied, we were a really young company. We squeaked by with a score of 81. And then every 2 years you get recertified, and we moved up to 95. We're always working to improve our score. And we know that we're in good company with other brands that are kind of seeing how focusing on more than just your bottom line, but also protecting people and the planet is really important. So we're happy to be in good company with other like-minded brands from other industries. So I want to talk a little bit about our advocacy work, because it's pretty unusual to have a company actively asking Congress to regulate their own industry. But as I had mentioned, this is something that we're excited about and we think is really important to use our business voice in a meaningful way. So the kind of secret sauce that is no secret to anyone who's in this world is that the more people hear and read about an issue in the press, the more Congress pays attention. You need to have a presence in Washington, D.C., so we're actively lobbying. But perhaps most important is you need to have a grassroots presence. And so this is where I'll talk a little bit about the grassroots piece in a moment, but we've leveraged our unique business model to help create what we hope to see a groundswell of grassroots support for more comprehensive legislation in Washington. We've partnered with nonprofit leaders, and we've had some pretty big wins over the last few years. Just this summer, Governor Jerry Brown in the state of California signed into law one of the biggest pieces of legislation reforming the beauty industry that we've really seen since the 1970s. So we helped advocate for the last 2 years to pass a law in California that would require ingredients to be disclosed on professional salon products. And unlike those that are sold at retail. So if you walk into a store, ingredients need to be listed on personal care products outside of the fragrance loophole, but the same wasn't true for professional salon products. And as you would imagine, professional salon workers are exposed at higher rates to higher levels of toxic chemicals. We feel like it's important for them to have the right to know what they're exposed to every single day. And so we are really excited to see this legislation, which will have a national impact, passed this summer. Earlier in the summer, we worked again for the last 2 years to pass a bill in Hawaii to ban oxybenzone, which has been linked to damaging coral reefs. We worked with the leaders there, and I think the biggest thing that we brought to the table as a business was the opportunity to show that it's possible to have products that still protect your skin from the sun's harmful rays and prevent skin cancer without using ingredients that are also linked to harming the environment. I think oftentimes, and if we think back to 10 years ago, it was often hard for companies to say, yes, we can make products that are going to fill the marketplace and still make consumers happy. But luckily, we're in a place where, yes, we can have sunscreen that doesn't harm coral reefs. Back in 2015, we partnered with the Oregon Environmental Council to pass the Oregon Free Toxic Safer Children's Bill. And basically that legislation would restrict 66 of the most toxic ingredients that are commonly used in children's products, 22 of which are relevant to the personal care industry. And our work doesn't stop at the states. We've spent the majority of our time working at the federal level, mobilizing and trying to get Congress to pay attention to this, which I'll speak to a little bit more momentarily. We've expanded into Canada in the last couple of years. And so we also, these are 2 meetings that we've had with members of Parliament in Canada, making sure that personal care safety is included in the upcoming reform of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. So I'm going to close. I have 2 slides. You know, we have a really interesting business model here at Beautycounter. We sell through 3 different channels, the first of which is directly through our website. The second is through pop-ups and retail partnerships. And the third is through a network of independent consultants. And so our CEO felt that she had no background in direct sales, and the industry has a bad name for, in some cases, for a good reason. And she felt like it was important to create a multi-channel business, but she still wanted one of those channels to have a grassroots element. And so we basically dusted off an old direct sales model and made it into a modern, fresh business model where we could both empower women to make political change at the local level. And so that's some of the work that we've done. This past March, I want to just give a little highlight of kind of how we've used a grassroots model at a business. We had our consultants, is the name we use to the people who sell our products. We had over 1,400 of our consultants all across North America in the month of March host district meetings with their elected officials, both in Canada and here in the United States. And while we had those 250 meetings taking place all across North America, we brought 100 women from 2 from each state to Capitol Hill to lobby, and we had over 100 meetings in one day. And simultaneously, we mobilized our clients, people that just enjoy our products, that don't sell them, to place phone calls and text and email their members of Congress. And so, you know, that led to some pretty significant momentum around a bipartisan negotiation. The bill has stalled out because of the upcoming election, but I think that we're really well positioned moving into the next Congress for cosmetic safety reform to be something that is at the top of the agenda. So this is all to say that, you know, we take our product formulations really seriously. We take the tone and tenor and science of how we educate people very seriously, knowing that we don't want to use unnecessary scare tactics. But we also spend a tremendous amount of our time and companies' bandwidth advocating for a system where hopefully, you know, toxic and harmful ingredients aren't in the products that we use every day. So at the end of the day, you know, we think it's not only up to the consumer to ask really smart questions of the companies that she's buying from, but we also want to engage people in nonpartisan advocacy in a way that they maybe haven't before. So we encourage people to text Better Beauty to 52886. And this is simply a link to email one's member of Congress and let them know that they also believe in a system where hopefully one day we can have personal care products that are free of harmful chemicals. So I will pause there because I believe we want to leave some time for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsay and Mike. I will start out with some questions of my own. For participants, there's a Q&A button, and you can type your questions in there. Oh, actually, I see one right there. This is for you, Mike. Is Mind the Store considering an effort to address chlorpyrifos in food, which was also planned to be banned prior to the current administration?
The short answer is we're not. And, the main reason is because there are other organizations that are out there that are doing really good work in this space. Groups like PANA and Friends of the Earth and Beyond Pesticides that are working on chemicals such as that. However, we are increasing our efforts to drive chemicals of concern, industrial chemicals out of the food supply. This summer, we sent letters to 75 of the nation's top grocery stores, as well as restaurant and fast food chains, urging them to take action on PFAS chemicals and also orthophthalates in food packaging, food contact materials, and the food supply. And following that up this year, for the first time ever, we've added restaurant and fast food chains to the scope of companies we're ranking in this year's report card, because we think that they can take an important role in driving certain chemicals of concern, particularly phthalates, PFAS, and bisphenols out of the food supply. But yeah, it's, that's not to say that we don't share concerns with that ingredient. We just recognize that it's not exactly our role, and other organizations are working in this space. We predominantly, historically, have worked on chemicals largely regulated by EPA in consumer products under TSCA. That's kind of been kind of our sweet spot, if you will.
Great. Mike, could you tell us a little bit about how you help companies like Amazon that previously didn't have a chemical policy to develop there? Are you involved in that process? And also a follow-up question, is there enforcement for these types of policies that these retailers have?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So we both will run public-facing campaigns to engage retailers to drive chemicals of concern out of their supply chain. And at the same time, we do partner with and work with certain companies to improve their approach to chemicals management. When we started engaging Amazon 2 years ago, they had no chemical policy at all. And as a result of our campaign and engagement, I'm happy to report that just a week and a half ago, Amazon launched their first ever chemical policy, and they identified a list of, I think, about 50 or 60 chemicals of high concern. They're working to reduce and eliminate chemicals like phthalates, formaldehyde releasers, parabens, triclosan, and others. And I think while their policy is somewhat limited in that it's starting to focus on their private brand products, it's exciting given how influential of a company Amazon is. The company has committed to expand their policy to other product categories and other geographies over time. So we're really excited about how companies like Amazon can really drive transformative change in the retail space.
Okay.
So yes, absolutely. We do work with companies in certain instances when there's a real appetite to do good.
Great. This question is for you, Lindsay. Does Beautycounter make an effort to reduce plastics and/or toxic chemicals in packaging and not just products?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're actually working on a huge packaging initiative for 2019, but as it stands, the same, how I mentioned the never list, our restricted substance list for our product formulations, we have a similar one for our product packaging. So I will admit, though, that this is very challenging. So what this means is that, we don't want to have any plastics that have any phthalates or BPA or vinyl, et cetera. The problem is that when you start to look at the sustainability of different products, post-consumer recycled plastic is far better than virgin plastic, but there's major leachability issues. And so we haven't cracked that code yet. We are shifting more towards glass, knowing that the carbon footprint for glass is often higher, both from a shipping and production standpoint. But that glass is really good material from a leachability standpoint and also from recyclability end. And we're also exploring refillables. But I think one of the biggest challenges, I feel really confident in the current packaging assortment we have from a toxicity standpoint. But I think the challenge is, shifting to more sustainable packaging in a way that isn't going to raise prices to the end consumer in a meaningful way, because we want to be really mindful of that. And the other thing is that a lot of packaging is sourced abroad, and our CEO wants us, our manufacturing is based here in the United States, but she wants us to source domestically as much as possible, which also has cost implications. So that's all to say that balancing those different factors isn't easy, but it's something that my team here is kind of tackling with the vengeance for this next year. So hopefully we'll see more improvements as the market, especially the packaging marketplace, shifts over the next few years as well.
Great. And this is another question for you, Lindsay. Does Beautycounter share your knowledge and expertise on ingredients and screening with other makeup and personal care brands? And doesn't this, if you do share with other companies and your advocacy in general, hurt your potential profits and market position? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we do both on the research side and our advocacy work. And yes, one could easily argue that it takes away our edge and our leadership in the marketplace, but that's not why our CEO started the company. She started the brand with a real kind of altruistic view of transforming the beauty industry. And so we remain steadfast in our kind of dedication to do that. So I mentioned the Tufts research, some of the ingredients that have been tested. The research team is going to be putting on a peer-reviewed track. So we'll wait, and once that's published publicly, everyone can have access to it. And for the other tests that we've done, non-animal tests, we plan to share those publicly so the industry can also learn from it. Similarly, a year and a half ago, we started what's called the Counteract Coalition. We reached out to our competitors in the clean beauty industry to start a coalition in Washington, D.C. And the reason we did that is because Beautycounter, while the company's been growing and our presence has been very strong on Capitol Hill, if there's anything I learned in my time in D.C., it's that you have to work with others in order to pass meaningful legislation. And so we felt that there was a big lack of voices from the clean beauty market on Capitol Hill. And so we have now kind of teamed up with our competitors, so to speak, to kind of show them the ropes of how to use their voice in Washington. And again, this is something that makes our brand really unique. So some people asked us, like, why would you invite your competitors to kind of be a part of that process? And again, the answer is that's how we're going to win. So it's been fun for us to be kind of a more collaborative type of beauty brand.
Okay, somebody asked, my concern is that they put ingredient labels in very tiny font that is extremely hard to read on many products. What are either of you doing to advocate for readability on product labels?
I can answer that briefly. I don't know, Mike, if you have thoughts, but it's a huge challenge, especially in the personal care space when you've got product packaging like for lipsticks that are super, super tiny, and you have to try to fit all the ingredients on there. I think a couple things we're doing, first of which we also publish all of our ingredient lists online on the product pages, which is not always standard practice in the beauty industry. The second is we also partner with EWG Verified, which is a third-party certification, because even if someone does know a lot about ingredients, it's still, even if you can have large fonts and read the ingredients, it's still confusing for consumers to know which products have been vetted. So we partner with third parties to help kind of give that visual credibility on product packaging or on the product pages as well.
Great. One last question for you, Mike. How do you encourage retailers to do better? For example, Target does pretty well on your report card, but continues to sell feminine hygiene products that contain harmful chemicals. So how do you put pressure on your sort of best rated companies? And then I also have one follow-up to that is, do you involve retailers in federal and state regulatory reform? So could you answer those?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Well, on the second question you asked, one of the exciting developments is that we've seen some of the retailers, I was talking about the paint stripper issue before, where we're working to get retailers to ban methylene chloride and NMP in paint strippers. One exciting development is we've seen some companies, like Lowe's in particular, actually step up, not unlike Beautycounter has in some respects, by also advocating for reform. Lowe's didn't want to be the only retailer that banned deadly paint strippers because they were concerned that others might just buy it elsewhere. And for them, it wasn't a competitive advantage. So they've gotten more active in lobbying in DC, lobbying EPA to move forward on finalizing the methylene chloride and NMP proposed regulations. So that's been exciting to see. We haven't seen retailers step out as much as we would like, but certainly not as much as a company like Beautycounter. But we're hopeful that we'll see companies do more, because many recognize that they can't solve these issues on their own, and we do need systemic solutions. And certainly, as part of that, Washington has an important role to play. And then to answer your previous question in terms of how do we engage the leaders, for the companies that are doing pretty well, that a lot of that has been behind the scenes engagement, providing written recommendations on how companies could improve. And certainly for companies like Target and Walmart and CVS that have been real leaders in this space compared to others, we are seeing those companies continue to improve and expand their programs and policies. So you mentioned Target. Just this year, Target has adopted the ZDHC guidelines restricting chemicals of high concern in the manufacturing of apparel, which is really exciting and important, because some of the biggest environmental and public health impacts of making textiles and apparel is in its manufacturing, which is quite chemically intensive. So the fact that Target has expanded their policy to not only address chemicals in products, but going further upstream in the supply chain to restrict chemicals in the manufacturing, that is exciting. So we are seeing our behind the scenes engagement with some of these companies like Target, like Walmart, lead to improvements. Walmart, for example, is one of the retailers this year that announced that they were banning the sale of deadly and dangerous paint strippers by this February. So that was one example of how our engagement with one of these retail leaders has led to a demonstrable improvement in public health protection.
Okay, great. So we're out of time, so I'll hand it back over to you, Maria. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. We are approaching the end of today's webinar. A video recording will be available on the CHE website soon, and tomorrow you will receive an email containing a link to the video. CHE's next partnership webinar will take place Tuesday, October 30th, and is titled Plastic Production's Threats to Health: Global Trends, Chemical Footprints of Common Plastics, and the PVC Industry's Wake of Pollution. This is the first webinar in our new series, The Effects of Plastics on Health. To learn more and to RSVP, please visit our website at healthandenvironment.org. If you are new to CHE and would like to stay updated about upcoming events and more, please sign up to receive our newsletter by selecting the Join Us tab at the top of any page on our website. Additionally, if you appreciate these CHE partnership webinars, bringing you the latest environmental health research for free, we encourage you to support CHE's ongoing work by making a tax-deductible donation via our secure website. Again, our website is healthandenvironment.org. With that, I would like to thank our speakers once more for taking the time to present today, and Karen for excellent moderation. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.